Today I'll be covering the popularity of the box office smash hits Grease and Hairspray. Grease has become a box office smash, being made for $6 million and grossing approximately $395 million at the box office, beating out the Superman film to be the highest grossing film of that year. Grease was released in June, making it a well-loved summer favourite immediately, becoming a blockbuster film within weeks of release and was distributed by Paramount Pictures. Approximately there were 17.2 million admissions in UK cinemas, according to the BFI, and the overall foreign revenue came to $205,696,409 The marketing team recently had been dominated by predominantly posters and trailers on limited amounts of terrestrial viewing, at which point was becoming more popular thanks to the popularisation of colour TV. We see a lot of nostalgia surrounded series being released, with the premiere of Happy Days as well as Dreamboats and Petticoats, a jukebox musical set in the 1950s, as the aforementioned films and series, making popular the style of dresses with either sweetheart or boat necklines. For women and men wore either plain coloured t-shirts with leather jackets and jeans, or a tie with a suit jacket and trousers. To find out more, we will turn our attention to the people I handed out questionnaires to see what they remembered, if anything at all, and what they remember about the marketing specifically. We continue on with seeing the parody done by comedians Hilda Baker and Arthur Millard, released in 1978. Let's take a look. Yes, this happened this year, and we allowed it to reach number 22 in the charts. But it reached a different part of the population. The viewers of the parody meant it became more accessible, potentially bringing in more revenue from people being so horrified by it that they wanted to see the actual film, which in turn is a concerning thought when we turn to what happens in the film. Some people have taken issue with this film as it references harassment in school settings. The phrase sexual harassment had been made common in workplaces during the decade, being coined by women working in spaces where men can freely assault or harass them. This was at a time when women in employment across the world went up, with housewives becoming less commonplace. Throughout we can see how Danny is trying to pressure Sandy into being more intimate, as well as taking context from when the T-Birds are talking about Annette's jugs, and slut-shaming of Rizzo. This would have been common in office spaces, but it would not have been surprising if schools also had this kind of thing going on, since there was very little protection for teens at this time in the US, since the law stated in the 1964 Equality Act that it would only be applied to women in the working world. If we look at the economy in the film market, the US and UK and much of the Western world had just come out of an economic recession, with the US oil industry declining and Nixon quitting office before he could be impeached, and the UK was just coming out of a snap election. I have deduced, looking through several sources, the golden age of Hollywood basically thrived on the Great Depression, and it seemed to be a similar case in this instance. Grease came first in the sprint to become the highest grossing film of the year, beating out big hitters like Halloween, Jaws 2 and the aforementioned Superman. The film being released in summer and involving a summer fling, it seems to be more relatable to an audience going to the cinema, young teens and couples. The film much similar and comparatively relatable to Grease would be West Side Story, another musical film set in a high school involving rival gangs and of romance and heartbreak. Most films have been distributed on film for cinemas and theatres and VHS for home viewing, making it highly accessible for people who are interested, whether to go rewatch it or to go and watch it with friends, families, dates, etc. The film made $23,420,295 over the next 40 years, showing its popularity as everlasting. Now I will begin talking about Hairspray. As we all know, it's been made into a very popular stage musical under the same name now. The film grossed $202,548,575 worldwide, with the UK gross being $25,780,499 and the American domestic gross being $118,871,849, all statistics coming from Box Office Mojo. The film was released in the summer of 2007, making it a summer favourite, similarly to Grease. The film was released within the aptly named iDecade, the decade in which technology was advancing more than anyone could predict, with the release of the iPod, iPhone and further innovation of the iMac within the first decade of the 21st century. With the information I have obtained through watching the Sian miniseries called The 2000s, which was produced by Hollywood legend Tom Hanks, I gained further knowledge on how it evolved. This was the decade which saw a generation growing up with technology, the advancement of it within this heavily politically aware climate as well. The announcement that Barack Obama would run for the office of the President of the United States in 2007. What we have to remember is important about this is that it is related to Hairspray at this point in time. Hairspray is set within 1962, during the Kennedy presidency of 1961 and 1963, and in a time where civil rights movements were taking place, with the boycott of Mississippi buses in 1964 and their racial segregation aboard them, as well as Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington in the prior year of 1963. Hairspray comments on a civil rights protest movement in Baltimore during this time, showing the peaceful protest, and the police reaction in the film is rather similar to the reaction that these protesters got during these riots, if you care to look to my left. Within the film itself, we also see a storyline involving heavily institutionalised racism, with the way that the Von Tussles are dealing with social integration, with the cancellation of Negro Day, commenting on the culture in this time. The mother, Velma Von Tussle, is also sizist, criticising our lead actress Tracy, or lead character Tracy, on her appearance, saying she won't make it in the world because of her size. Within culture now, we have models like Ashley Graham and Tessa Holliday, who are defying the unwritten rules of style and body confidence, originally hidden between the 1960s and the late 1990s with the heroin chic physical look. When we look at the casting of both films, we notice that John Travolta is involved in both, as Danny Zuko in Grease and as Edna Turnblad in Hairspray. He's a household name now, since he was also just coming off the Saturday Night Fever hype in the 80s, and he had also recently starred in the 2006 series The People vs. O.J. Simpson, American Crime Story. We can also look at Zac Efron representing the male lead named Link Larkin in Hairspray. He was recently in Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile in 2019. I, like many young girls, were in the throes of love with the one and only Zac Efron, coming in hot from his recent film trilogy, High School Musical. I remember it was my birthday when High School Musical came out in the cinema. I went and saw it with some of my friends, and in later life classed these kinds of films as guilty pleasure. Musicals aimed at preteen and teenage girls usually do well in the box office, as they're generally released around spring or summer when everyone is out having fun with friends and or family. Hairspray also received 3 different adaptations. The first iteration was a film under the same name, directed by the legendary director John Waters, who also directed such films and is known for such films that are more quirky, such as Pink Flamingos and Crybaby. The second is of course a Broadway show also under the same name, making its mark on the Broadway stage. And finally, the third iteration is the live television version aptly named Hairspray Live, which aired on NBC in 2016. Referring back to the iDecade, Hairspray was released into the world with the online influence of YouTube uploading, social media and the steady move from film to digital recording, not to mention the near eradication of VHS by the early noughties. Social media plays a big role in the film's release nowadays, with adverts on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, etc. Trailers openly available to anyone and everyone, and the promotional accounts and pages that can be set up by the marketing teams. The switch from VHS to DVD was a change I remember. Having a VHS of Sooty and Friends, but being bought the DVD of Hairspray at the same time when it had just come out, and being jealous my friends had it before me. The DVD rental market from places like Netflix and The DVD rental market from places like Netflix, at the time not online, and Blockbusters were holding strong, but only in the last 5 years the market has decreased in favour of online streaming, which relates back to social media. Demand and consumer availability is extensive now, with more people having Facebook accounts and using Twitter to interact with fandoms and those who have the same interests as you, and the increase of directors who also interact with the fans after the film's release, as well as the shameless plugging of their films. Thank you for watching. I hope this was informative.